Hello, welcome back to The Perspective. We're still talking to Joe Becker from Human Rights Watch, Advocacy Director for Children's Rights. So these recommendations, Joe, that you spoke of earlier to the government, does this include also public education? Not specifically to just parents and the children, but the entire community has to be aware of this.
Well, our priority is that the public education be provided for tobacco growing families, because those are the ones that really need this information about how their children's health may be affected by working in tobacco fields. So that's the first priority. Certainly we want other people to know that, especially consumers, if they light up a cigarette, if they're lighting up a Lucky Strike or a Dunhill, that there's no way of knowing whether or not that cigarette was produced.
Where it comes from,
whether
who is producing them.
Exactly.
You had three main recommendations to the government, and surely also on all fronts you send recommendations to the companies as well.
Exactly. It's not just the Indonesian government, but these the tobacco companies that are buying this tobacco also have responsibilities to avoid human rights abuses. And so in our correspondence with companies and in our communications and in our report, we make clear that they should be adopting or strengthening their child labor policies to be clear that they will not use tobacco that is produced with hazardous child labor. And by that we mean that children under 18 should not be working in direct contact with tobacco leaves or tobacco in any form. And furthermore, that these companies should not be buying from suppliers that don't enforce that policy. There are some tasks that can be done by children in the early stages of the tobacco harvest. So, for example, plantings while they're wearing gloves to protect their skin, for example, or when the plants are still small, watering the plants with some lightweight jugs. But once the plants get to a certain size, it's almost impossible to prevent children's exposure to the nicotine. And so that's why we believe that it's really important to have a clear prohibition on direct contact with tobacco.
So it's also pushing businesses to have a more ethical, what we call ethical business, and making sure that they actually are very aware of how the products or their materials are being processed. That involves safety and security for children who are working at the farm as well.
Exactly.
So we're trying to push out to minimize the effects on children here. That's what we're trying to push out?
Yeah. What we want the companies to do is apply what we call due diligence throughout their supply chains. So that they know where their tobacco is coming from. They monitor those farms so that they know what the conditions are under which it's produced. And they can also trace it through the supply chain. And if they find child labor, they take action to address it and remedy it. One of the things about Indonesia is that the vast majority of tobacco is sold through the open market system. So a local farmer will sell their tobacco to a local trader. That trader will sell it to another trader who will sell it to a warehouse owned by one of these big tobacco companies, either an Indonesian or a multinational company. So when it's going through all these different stages, there's no way of knowing where the tobacco is coming from. Some of the multinationals have a direct contact.
All right, Joe, before we go, three recommendations that you've submitted to the government, and you also mentioned recommendations that you gave out to the businesses, the corporations. Due diligence is the word here. Yeah,
exactly. The big tobacco companies, they have a responsibility to conduct what we call due diligence, to put measures in place to ensure that they are not contributing to child labor in their supply chains. So that means being able to trace where their tobacco is coming from and adopting clear policies prohibiting the involvement of children under the age of 18 in any hazardous child labor, and ensuring that those suppliers that they buy tobacco from are implementing those policies.
And what is next after the press conference?
So tomorrow we're holding a roundtable discussion together with representatives from various government ministries, the United Nations, NGOs, to talk about what can we do next? What are the steps that can be taken to really eliminate hazardous child labor in tobacco farming in Indonesia?
And first and foremost, you just want the government to address these three recommendations, and then from there on we expect things to change. It's not going to change overnight, but at least there's a good will from the government to address the issue on child labor here in Indonesia.
And we believe that with those 3 steps, public education, better enforcement of child labor laws, and being clear that work in tobacco fields for children under 18 is hazardous, will go a long way to helping to address this problem.
All right. Joe, thank you so much for coming out here. I know you're hailing from New York just for this special report, and I think we will, and I have a good faith that we will talk to Human Rights Watch again and see how this has progressed from the roundtable process and how the government has embarked on addressing this issue. Thank you very much,
Great,
Joe.
thank you.
All right, that has been Joe Becker, the Advocacy Director of Children's Rights from Human Rights Watch, on a special report on child labor here in Indonesia. My name is Florence Armein. Thank you for watching.